Let's see. This is well.
China's social credit system has preoccupied Westerners' imagination since 2015, and interest in it had only increased in the context of COVID vaccine mandates and other policies related to the pandemic, which are seen to be an ideological and political import from China. Worse yet, China's system is imagined to be like an episode from the show Black Mirror, where each citizen has a score that determines their position in society. However, this has absolutely nothing to do with reality. The vast majority of information on the social credit system in the Western world has done more to mystify rather than elucidate. One of the very first English language articles on the Chinese system, which appeared in late 2015, is very illustrative here. The organization which prepared the article did not even operate in China, and, as it turned out later, and was
Okay, you don't have to per se operate in China to get information or to criticize China. But I'll continue. Okay, I'm starting to hear questions raised here and here about the accuracy of the source on which I based this blog post. I did include a passing caution about my lack of direct knowledge of the source accuracy, but I wish I had been more explicit in offering that caution given the language and cultural barriers between the United States and China, and the scarcity of reporting on the system by professional journalists with direct knowledge of Chinese society. I hope to see such reporting soon. That said, the Chinese scoring systems still sound plenty bad, and we all still need to consider the danger that our own institution will drift towards such systems and their potential abuses. Okay, I can stand behind this. If you have a system and you very poorly report on it, or very poorly send out that this is happening in the country, even if those reports are limited, it can still hold information that is true, and still can be viewed bad even if you don't know all the situations.
admitted by the author
I
himself.
think it's more like a geopolitical interest, but we'll see.
The article was based on rumors and speculations as opposed to concrete analysis or any familiarity with China, and it expressed author's own anxieties about digital oligarchies in the West.
Well, no, they said they had a source. Like, I'm not gonna go deep into this. Like, I'm gonna trust someone's word on this time. But you know, this is what they'll often do. Often people will say, "Okay, they have been inaccurate here, therefore everything is inaccurate." That's not what I want to do. Okay, I want to see what parts are right, what parts are wrong. That's how you do an analysis.
However, this very approach came to form the basis and the essence of the narrative on China's social credit system in the West. And while Western media tend to present China's system as a dark secret underbelly of the communist rule, as a matter of fact, both the system and the documents related to it are open to public scrutiny. And instead of being oppressed and controlled by the system, Chinese citizens themselves let their views be known. Western experts who work in this field, even if critical of China and its system, constantly note how the popular narrative in the West has little connection to reality. In order to appreciate the complex reality of China's system, it is important to understand the very meaning of the phrase social credit system. For one thing, the word credit in China, depending on context, can mean both credit and trustworthiness. As we will see later, it is much more correct to translate and understand it precisely as social trustworthiness system rather than social credit system.
This basically has the same outcome. Like, he may change the words around, but it's still the same outcome. Like, if you go to a bank and you say, yeah, my trustworthiness is very high, or like, my credit score is very high, I mean, they quantify, they basically are saying, yeah, let's quantify this specific thing into a score. That's what they're doing, and now they're trying to simplify or trying to appeal it more to you by saying this is trustworthiness.
Secondly, China's social credit system is understood in the West as a finished monolithic mechanism of social control, where citizens are ranked and segregated based on their numerical social credit rating, which is influenced by one's views and actions and then comes to determine their socioeconomic status. However, in reality, it is very difficult to even call it a system, because in essence, it is just a collection of political and legal guidelines for solving certain very concrete problems in Chinese society. As such, instead of being a unified monolithic system, it encompasses many different initiatives to solve many different problems facing Chinese citizens. The major source of Western misconception is precisely an inability to distinguish between these different initiatives and their different goals, scopes, and purposes. But before we delve deeper into what China's social credit system is, let us begin by asking why it was conceived and initiated in the first place. After the Cultural Revolution and Mao's death, the Communist Party, led by Deng Xiaoping, initiated the policy of reform and opening up, which, among other things, meant that China was becoming a socialist market economy. The result was an unprecedented economic growth and an unparalleled pace of modernization. The processes that took hundreds of years in the West and the side effects of which were amortized through colonialist policy happened in several decades in China without any help from the outside. The Chinese state had difficulty keeping up with the pace of modernization and controlling its most pernicious side effects. Even such basic things as enforcement of the law were lacking due to insufficiently developed legal system and a weak legal state apparatus. This meant, for instance, that even as late as last decade, market scandals were almost a daily occurrence in China. Illustrative here is 2008 scandal where baby milk powder was found to be deliberately contaminated with melamine, which resulted in 300,000 babies getting sick. Similar food, vaccine, and other product quality scandals were a constant occurrence in China. Add to that various fraudulent financial schemes, unpaid salaries and loans, restaurant hygiene scandals, voided contracts, and unmet obligations, and you have an enormous problem. Top that with the inability of the Chinese state to enforce the law, and you have a social crisis of trust. It is important to realize that instead of being an omnipotent totalitarian power, the Chinese state has been, in fact, extremely decentralized ever since
Fiscal reform decentralization, portion of minimum by central and subnational governments. Proportion of expenditures by central and subnational governments. That looks pretty nice. Now, I don't know much about this, but I'll say it's pretty nice.
The reform and opening up. There exists very limited cooperation.
Oh yeah, by the way, if countries open up to like Western markets, they have an economic growth. Vietnam has the same thing, like they implemented free market reforms in the 1990s, I think. If you open up to those markets, your GDP will increase. That's basically how it goes, since we live in a neoliberal capitalist system. If you engage with it, you will get good outcomes of it. And that's also what happened to China here, I assume. As you can see in the chart on the left, I think 1993. I think that may be the point. They open up to the world, their economy grows, the country grows, everything goes better.
Not only between separate regional governments, but also between separate governmental institutions in general. Among other things, what this meant with regards to the law was that even if a culprit was found guilty, they could simply refuse to fulfill their legal obligations and move to another region without any repercussions. In fact, many culprits having their fraudulent activities dissolved in one region could simply start over by setting up in another region. This was also partly a result of the fact that China lacked even a basic unified national datasets. Separate regions and even separate governmental institutions used their own identifiers and constructed their own datasets, so it was not uncommon for business entities to have close to a dozen separate IDs. The emergence of China's social credit system was an acknowledgement that China's judicial system was ill-equipped to address these issues of market misconduct. The founding document of the system stated that only a small portion of such infringements result in criminal prosecution and judicial punishment. The majority of contract violations and other untrustworthy phenomena cannot be resolved through criminal investigation and judicial trial
Majority of contract violations and other unforeseen phenomena cannot be resolved through criminal investigation and judicial trial. I don't really see how though. Like, is it because the law is ill-equipped to handle it? Because that would mean you can improve it. But the system should be improving on that, that you should make laws considering those things. Like, I'm wondering, like, if Western countries can do it without a social credit system, would it be possible for China to do it as well? I recognize it's a large country and they need to do a lot of centralizing, but I mean, it's still possible, right? Like, it's not like the size of China makes it impossible to do so. Oh, by the way. Oh. Infrared China social credit system. Alright, let's get back to it.
And even in the event that a judicial trial occurs, there are still considerable difficulties in enforcement of the judgment. The contract violations that the social credit system seeks to address is precisely this type of untrustworthy economic activity, those which are inconvenient to prosecute under public security laws.
Whoa, okay. So this is where I have a problem, right? So they acknowledge now, okay, the system is ill-equipped to handle it. So they have the social credit system to resolve these issues, those which are inconvenient to prosecute under public security laws. I don't know how I feel about this. If you saying it's inconvenient to resolve trustworthiness issues, I feel like you're just like putting it aside, like you're shoving it, like instead of using the systems that are in place to resolve or to try to resolve these issues, you're just gonna put it away. It's like saying in the US, for example, you have out of court settlements, or you have no plea deals. Instead of saying, yeah, it's gonna be difficult to find you a lawyer to do all these processes through the judicial system, it's gonna be an inconvenience. Therefore, we offer you a plea deal so you won't have to go through all the trouble. You'll be in prison for maybe 2 years instead of 5, and we don't have to go through with all of this. That's basically what they're saying. You are an inconvenience to the system because you committed a crime. You are it's gonna be a burden on us, which is literally the job to take care of it. So therefore, we're going to make this system up so we can alleviate our issues instead of you getting proper right. I feel like this is the same. They're basically saying it. The systems we have in place for it are not adequate. Let's shove it off. Let's do something else. I don't like it.
Therefore, at its most basic, China's social credit system was first conceived in 1999 as an attempt at unification and standardization of corporate datasets and as a mechanism of enforcing the law and ensuring the meeting of legal obligations, without which Chinese authorities understood ongoing crisis of trustworthiness would tear the social fabric apart. The founding document identified its key aims as a prevention of production safety accidents, food and drug security incidents, commercial deception, production and sales of counterfeit products.
Now this is all fine if you can capture this in law. You can do this. Production safety accidents. You have boards who are doing the safety. In the Netherlands, it's the Arbo wet food and drug security incidents. In the US, you have the Clean Food and Drug Law. I think it was passed by Roosevelt. I don't know the specific name. Commercial deception. You have those as well. Production and sales of counterfeit products. You have those as well. Like, these systems are already in place in law in a lot of Western countries. And again, the inconvenience argument would basically mean, yeah, we're going to shove it off to something else, which is less not really less legal, but less less judicial. It's less set in stone. It's more arbitrary.
Products, tax evasion, fraudulent financial claims, academic impropriety, and other such phenomenon, which cannot be stopped in spite of repeated bans. A parallel problem that the system was conceived to address was the same that was faced by virtually every Western state at some point in its history: lack of credit ratings that would facilitate financial activity. Lacking such financial indicators which would let banks determine financial credibility of a borrower, Chinese banks by and large lent only to biggest corporations and state-backed or owned businesses. Private individuals as well as small and medium-sized businesses simply lacked access to credit. This meant that for a very long time the Chinese economy was driven by cash transactions, which became increasingly unfeasible as the economy developed. And even now, more than 200 million Chinese do not have an account with any financial institution, and only 40% have any form of official financial history at all. Chinese officials tried various political means to force financial institutions to lend to small and medium-sized businesses. However, lacking necessary financial indicators to measure creditworthiness, these political measures would not have any positive long-term implications.
Again, like Western countries have a credit system, or at least the banks have an idea of what you're worth and how to start a business. Like, I don't see why they can't implement it. But maybe I'm nitpicking.
An attempt to develop financial rating was one of the factors that spurred the development of what came to be known as a social credit system. And now, with the rise of Xi Jinping, the social credit system was conceptually extended from corporate actors and the market sphere to society at large, including the government itself, because it was understood that it was not only the crisis in the marketplace, but a moral social crisis of values, where greed, selfishness, vulgar materialism, excessive consumption, corruption, and related problems were tearing Chinese society apart and diminishing the authority of the Communist Party.
I don't like this. Like, now you're ascribing characteristics of people why a society is being torn apart. I don't know, like, that's not really essential to people. You know, people are not essentially greedy, or they're not like greedy people who can tear a system apart. If people are being greedy, it's because of the socio-economic circumstances. For example, with BLM, if people are rioting in the street, then there must be some social unrest that led to that occasion. If people are being greedy and the system is therefore being torn apart, there is a socio-economic circumstance, or there is I know there's a circumstance in the country that you're living that must lead to people being greedy. It can be less regulation, it can be poor conditions that will lead them to selling products that are bad for you. You know, all those things have a reason. I reject this idea that's just a character trait. A character trait a lot of people share, apparently, that can just rip a country apart. But that's the premise that they're going for. And if you believe that it's some sort of characteristics of someone that can tear, that can, as they say it again, tear it apart, then you would eventually have to conclude that you need to keep people in line, and you would have to hammer in that these are the standards and values that they have. I would almost say that this is like against freedom of speech, because basically then you're saying we're going to forbid the expression of greed, we're going to forbid the expression of anger, and I don't know, the limit of freedom of expression, how bad or wrong people may seem it, rubs me the wrong way.
As a response, spiritual civilization construction was initiated. The goal.
Yeah, see? This is what I mean. Like we all want these things to be enforced, but doing it by law or doing it with an incentive system, that's where you lose me. Like, I'm more of a person, we should make those surroundings so that people will do this. By the way, I'm in the way, but it says rule of law and friendship. You know, that's where you lose me. You can't force people to be a certain way. Well, you can do it, but I don't think that's justified in doing so.
All of which was propagation of patriotic socialist values. It was soon incorporated in the political and legal guidelines that we today know as the social credit system, recontextualizing it as a set of guidelines to foster a culture of law-abiding sincerity and civic responsibility, increasing judicial credibility, improving the efficiency of regulatory and administrative services, and ensuring local governments honor commitments to the people, the party, and the state. Contrary to some abstract thirst for social control on the part of the Communist Party, it is these very concrete, tangible problems that stand as the context for the origins of the social credit system.
No. Because you just said, no, it's not concrete if you just said, like a minute ago, that it's because of greed. Because that's subjective. That's something you arbitrarily said, okay, now we have a problem with greed. Okay, yeah, you have a problem that people are being greedy. You have a problem that people are selling these products. Why is the reason? You say it's greed. I say it's because of the circumstance that they're in. And I would agree that this is basically social control of the people. Because as he acknowledged himself in this video, they want to reduce the greediness, they want to reduce the bad characteristics, which, or at least the characteristic that they deem wrong, that they deem as immoral. And I would say that is a limitation. Especially if, like, by the way, some of them are really in the interest of any state. Like, for example, patriotism, dedication, rule of law. I mean, most of them are good, don't get me wrong, but I would agree with patriotism, dedication, and rule of law. Because, I mean, I feel like these are used to keep you in line. You know, it means that there's no really an open room for discussion. But, you know, let's continue where this is going.
For the origins of the social credit system.
Still haven't heard how it specifically works, by the way, but we'll get to it.
It was conceived as a data-driven mechanism to restore social trust in Chinese society. However, it is important to note that contrary to the dominant narrative in the West, it was not really conceived or developed as an extension of state power at the expense of civil society, but quite the opposite. It was meant as a tool for market self-regulation without unnecessary intervention by the state bureaucracy. For instance, by making certain non-sensitive data available for public use, various applications were developed that allowed the public to filter businesses based on various criteria of trustworthiness. Furthermore, the thinking went that by being able to distinguish good market actors from bad ones, for instance, by measuring the history of their compliance with the pre-existing regulations and laws, regulators could focus their attention on the bad actors instead of wasting resources and bothering the good actors, and so reducing the bureaucratic overhaul of our Chinese society.
I don't know how I feel about this one. I feel like if you have a lot of like angry Yelp reviewers, that means that someone of the government's gonna inspect. Well, I think if you have a sincere complaint, you should bring it to the government, and then they should find out if it was a sincere complaint. I don't know, it seems like a sort of laziness, in my opinion. I may be wrong on it. Like again, like if you would have the system that could self-regulate, I don't know. I don't know about that one. Like economy is difficult. Like what if you have like 3 McDonald's and one of them is the only one nearby, then they're gonna investigate and close it. I don't know. Um, like how would they do this with monopolies in a specific country, in a specific region? Like would they shut it down if it had a bad review or like a lesser review? Maybe it works well. I'm waiting to see some answers. Oh, by the way, reviews. I I don't think reviews are good. Like if you wanna try product quality. Okay, something can taste really well or like can look really well or be really well, but yeah, okay, that's true. But like I don't think like a customer should be judging by the products they buy by their satisfaction if this product has been up to standards, because those are not the same. Right, for example, uh, roofs used to be done with asbestos. Um, turns out works great. You can get cancer from it. So now they have they all have to be removed, has to be done. Like if people were happy with it. No, I don't think Google reviews should be the thing that people would be that the government should be able to step in. Like if you have a lot of Yelp reviewers and then the health inspector is going to go by Yelp reviews, then fuck no, that's not how it goes. Like you want like I can imagine a lot of situations where you have a product with poor quality but people will still buy it. So I'll rate McDonald's like a 3 star, but apparently their meat isn't actually meat. Yeah, all right. Let's go over it if I'm done with this video. Yeah, again, if you go to like a McDonald's, oh, Subway. John Oliver did a great segment about this. Subway, their tuna sandwich isn't actually made of tuna, yet they're still able to sell it. Yet they are still able to call it a tuna sandwich. And who in the reviews is gonna say, yeah, I don't like it? How would they even determine if it's tuna or not? They're just gonna eat it. Like this is why market self-regulation doesn't really work. If you're going by the subjective standards of the people who buy the products, then it's not really a regulation, and it's more of like a preference that people have. And that would lead to bad outcomes, in my opinion. Like again, if you have asbestos or if you have tuna that's not really tuna, you get these issues.
This is how China's social credit system was conceived and articulated in various documents. Let us now analyze how it actually functions in practice and what kind of different initiatives comprise it. As was mentioned before, local governments could easily bypass it, and the central government had no way to really enforce the requirement to efficiently check upon its implementation or ensure that the measure is even taken in the first place. Social credit system is supposed to tear down the protective walls surrounding local governments. On the one hand, it is expected to increase transparency by standardizing and centralizing corporate data and making it publicly available, and on the other hand, it will give the central government the tools to bypass insubordinate local governments through so-called national blacklists. Contrary to Black Mirror dystopia, it is precisely these blacklists and not any numerical rating that forms the basis of the social credit system as it is used by the central government. As was mentioned before, the central issue that faced China's legal system was its inability to enforce both the law and court rulings. Blacklists were a direct governmental response to this problem. The mechanism of blacklist is rather straightforward. When a person or a business has a court ruling against them and refuses to carry it out, they are placed on a blacklist until they carry out their obligations. Being placed on a blacklist has widespread consequences. One becomes unable to travel, cannot buy luxury items, cannot receive honorary titles, join the Communist Party, hold high positions in state-owned enterprises, and so on. Sometimes there are...
Those are pretty heavy regulations, though. Like, I feel like they're basically stripping rights away. Because, I don't know how it is in other countries. I know in the US, for example, if you are, if you have been in prison, you're unable to vote in the election, or at least in the federal election again. In the Netherlands, it's different. Like, there are circumstances in which you have committed a crime that your right to vote will be retracted, or your right to participate in elections will be retracted, so you can't like join a party or something. However, that I don't think that's the case in most situations, and I think the US, for example, has a pretty barbarous system if you won't allow ex-prisoners to vote. I would even go so far that if you are actively stripping voting rights or actively stripping people's powers away to be a part of the political system, just because you have on top of everything else, by the way, because you have violated rules, like does it get retracted if you like fulfill your public duty, like and how bad do they weigh against each other? Who gets to make the decisions? I'm really curious to the outcomes, but I think getting your voting rights away, or the ability to join the party, that's very, very extreme, and I would need a very good explanation why you would want to take it away of something so fundamental of a democracy. And that's just one point. I don't know, I'm already forgetting the other points, but this is the most outrageous one.
Are also publicly shamed.
Yeah, publicly shaming. Holy shit, that's almost like the definition of social control. Holy shit. Like social like I talked about this before. If you have poor opinions about ethno-nationalism or shit, like people will look weird at you, okay? That's like social deterrence. But if you're actually being publicly shamed, holy fucking shit, that's medieval. Okay, that's basically throwing tomatoes at someone who's stuck. Yeah, this is definitely social. Holy shit.
Such deliberately disproportionate sanctions are meant to lead to an establishment of a more trustworthy environment and ensure that court obligations...
Oh, yeah, more trustworthy. Yeah, they're just gonna shame people and say, okay, these people are fucking bad. This is like, this is actually like dystopian. Like, even in the way he's trying to represent this, it's insane to me how you can defend this.
This is the only mechanism related to the social credit system that is used by the national government, and, as we can see, it has absolutely nothing to do with ascribing citizens or businesses a numerical score. Blacklists are not even a parallel system to the law and the judiciary. It only attempts to ensure the enforcement of court rulings, and it is made explicitly clear that nobody can be put on a blacklist without a prior court ruling.
Okay, so there are court rulings. Okay, maybe I'm not fully against it. However, I do think the punishments are very, very heavy. Public shaming.
Blacklisting is used not only by the central government, but by local governments and separate governmental institutions. However, negative implications for those on such lists are usually less severe and limited to their respective fields of expertise. By most recent estimations, only up to 0.5% of the population is affected by local blacklisting annually. Much more importantly,
companies that want actually. Social credit system related sanctions are only imposed on a small minority, approximate of course. Approximate proportion of blacklisted companies, individuals, and government entities. I wanna research this. National Public Credit Information. National Public Credit Information. Center monthly Wait, this is monthly analysis. Never mind. Okay. I monthly analysis reports. On the governance of dishonesty. Wait. This looks promising. Nope, god damn it. Does he have sources? Does he have sources? No, no sources. God damn it. Alright. You know what? I'm gonna continue. I know this is true. I just wanted to know. Figure out real quick. Don't know.
Population is affected by local blacklisting annually. Much more importantly though, local governments are responsible for giving a concrete form to the social credit system as it is abstractly conceptualized in the law. As is usual in China, this development is decentralized so that every local government can experiment and try to find a workable form of social credit system for their specific conditions and within the limits of the guidelines that are ultimately set by the central government. Various lessons are drawn and adjustments are made in the process of these developments. This is a source of misconceptions in the West, because Westerners take a particular limited and experimental local program to be reflective of a national development and the views of the central government. It is difficult to even draw commonalities between different regions, considering that the social credit system is supposed to solve very broad problems of trust and virtue. So, for
Yeah, see again with the characteristics trust and virtue. Again, this is like basically be in line with our ideology, or else. I really have a problem against this. I don't know what he meant by the different view of the West versus China on localities and national issues. I don't know. I think I'm gonna try to steelman his argument. So I think what he is saying is, that China has implemented this, which allows for local governments to adjust their policies on a local level, where in the West, it is the other way around. You have a small local problem, and that needs to be dealt with by a federal government. I don't know if I agree with this per se, but for example, if you have a shooting, a school shooting in a district like today, that therefore there should be like a national address to it. Or if you have a baby food shortage in one place, that it should be a federal thing. I'm just naming policies I randomly heard. Or like if one bridge is about to collapse, therefore we need to do federally like check all bridges. I don't know if that was he's going for. However, I do think that both views are valid. Like if you have a problem in a specific region, I think it is justified into looking what regions have this same problem and should there be a national address for it. But if you have like a small problem that's only in one region, then I think like the region government should solve it. I don't think then it should be like a federal thing. I think it really depends on what he meant by it. But I know specifically just mentioning it.
Example, when in 2017 the government designated 12 particularly successful local initiatives from which important lessons could be learned, it encompassed such things as incentivizing transparency of local businesses and organizations, making credit information easy to access to the...
Wait, but Western countries do this as well. Like they have small data sets of specific isolated places and certain study foundations, and then they extrapolate, hey, what if we do this in a broader scale? That's how most research is done in the West. Like it's not like the government does this, but there is a way that researchers go about in trying new things and trying to explore those ideas on broader levels eventually, if the results on a small level are good, This is what everybody does.
Public, establishing ranking system for business based on their regulatory compliance and so on and so forth. As far as local citizens are concerned, the range of initiative was also very broad. In Rongcheng, for example, exemplary citizens are praised by being displayed on public spaces, encouraging other citizens to emulate the behavior that is deemed exceptional. Authorities in Shanghai developed an application which integrates publicly available data and allows users to check the trustworthiness of local businesses as well as their own personal grade. The usage of the app is entirely voluntary and there are no consequences for having a low grade. This is, as a matter of fact, an explicit policy formulated by the central government. On the other hand, those deemed exceptional as trustworthy are eligible for certain benefits such as discount flight bookings. However, the central government has made it clear that any negative consequences of the social credit can only be based on the violation of the pre-existing law and cannot be based on arbitrary whims of the government bureaucrats. Therefore, when authorities in Suining County attempted to develop a system where citizens did indeed receive scores based on various actions and had access to social services restricted if that score became too low, both the residents and the state media attacked the initiative, comparing it to good citizen certificates issued by Japan during its wartime occupation of China, and the initiative was immediately scrapped. Therefore, the dystopian Western vision of the social credit system as a totalitarian imposition on an unwilling and dull citizenry could not be further from the truth. As one Western report on the matter notes, there is no shortage of examples where central and local governments reconsidered or reversed decisions after popular protest. Within the ambit of the social credit system itself, the response to the abortive Suining trial demonstrates the difficulty of implementing a policy that is largely rejected by the citizenry. More recently, the government's response to increasing concerns about user privacy on the dominant online platforms Tencent and Alibaba by shutting down the former social credit trial and reprimanding the latter further underscores the need to ensure citizens are, at least for the most part, on board with the program.
Yeah, like I could see this as a very logical consequence of what's happening. They are enforcing it very heavily, from what I'm hearing here.
Nevertheless, let us deal with the elephant in the room. Where does this idea of a numerical credit rating, which captivated Western imagination, come from? It is, in fact, real, but not in the way Westerners think of it. By and large, it comes from the so-called Sesame credit and is developed by Alibaba. When Alibaba was starting out as a digital intermediary for buyers and sellers, as well as mobile payment system, it faced the same problem of trust that we have already described earlier. How to develop trust in this digital marketplace when barely anyone had credit cards, let alone measurable credit histories or scores? Sesame Credit was Alibaba's solution. Much like with the initial development of the credit scores in the West, Alibaba used various proxies available to it in order to develop a numerical score which would indicate trustworthiness of a user on its platform. It is this score that is indeed affected by one's social activity.
Like, listen, I would agree with this, you know. If you have like a space like Amazon, if you can post your shit there online, and you can I'm sorry, have a specific user and say, okay, this specific user has posted this and this online, rate me, and he's very trustworthy, this and that. Fine. That's personal. But if you're going to do it as a rule of law, as untrustworthiness, that's where it becomes an issue. Reviewing is fine. Having consequences to those reviews is not fine. Very straightforward, I'd say.
Friendships on the platform and other indicators. However, Sesame Credit functions only as a private program, akin to corporate loyalty programs in the West, with absolutely no legal implications with regards to one's score. Sesame Credit indeed outgrown Alibaba and became a cultural phenomenon, with some people even sharing their scores on digital platforms. Furthermore, due to Alibaba signing deals with other businesses, a high Sesame credit score indicating a level of trustworthiness can grant certain perks. For instance, one can rent a bicycle without a deposit. However, the system itself is entirely voluntary. While more dystopian articles in the Western media present this as a top-down system of social control, in reality it is a system that is constantly developing through feedback loops with civil society. So, for instance,
yeah, so basically control. Like, no, like, this is very much a policy from top down, okay? You have a government, they implement this system, and therefore they get reviews, and they do well or they don't do well. Like, I'm wondering how the people in this, how the people in China are able to, like, object to certain laws or regulations which would alleviate the problems with them. You know, like, if your freedom basically depends on the Google review, then I hope those people get to say in how those Google reviews are being judged, right? If you know, like, someone is just being jokey, or someone has like an unrealistic complaint, like, how would you filter those out? Like, I really hope that the people in China have a decision in how those laws or dilemmas are being solved.
When certain experimentation of local governments transgresses what is deemed acceptable by the public, the latter makes its position clear and the policies are adjusted accordingly. In general, Chinese people...
Now, that would be a good thing. I'm wondering where it's going though.
Do not view the social credit system as an issue of the government versus the people, but as something that is being built together by the country as a whole. Therefore, considering the views of the Chinese public of the system in general, Western surveys find overwhelming support. According to the latest survey, more than 80% of the population supports the social credit system. It would be difficult to expect otherwise, considering that the system was initiated to deal with very concrete, tangible, bread-and-butter issues of a common Chinese citizen. With regards to privacy concerns, the same survey showed that almost 80% of the Chinese trust the central government the most with regards to their private data.
Wait, they trust the central government more? Okay. No, I get private companies. There is an issue, okay? Companies do often share data out with other people. Oh, wait. Oh shit, you can see. Yeah, 7% none of this above. Municipal government, provincial government, central government. Okay, fine, I guess. I don't know, I don't really trust the government. Well, I do trust government with my information because I know it's safe. But in the social credit system where it's accessible to everybody, I don't know about that one.
Percent of the Chinese trust the central government the most with regards to their private data. The central government is followed by provincial and then municipal governments, state-owned companies, foreign and then local enterprises. Consequently, recent years have also seen the development of new legislation to prevent data abuse from companies handling Chinese data, both inside the country and abroad, in what is called the Personal Information Protection Law. In many respects, it has been described as more comprehensive than GDPR by being more strict regarding third parties and data transfers. Furthermore, when representatives of Western businesses operating in China have been surveyed about the corporate social credit system, only 8% viewed it negatively, with majority either supporting or holding neutral views, because it is expected to decrease bureaucratic overhaul. This much was also recognized by a report prepared by the request of the US Congress. This project has considerable potential to enhance the bureaucratic efficiency of the Chinese state, increasing its predictive capacity and regulatory responsiveness, which could in turn enhance party legitimacy in China and other countries.
Yeah, see, here we go again. Like it's basically it's sustaining itself outside of the system that it should be sustained in. Right? You have a judicial system. You have people who can enforce the law. Do it through those systems. Don't do it through a social credit system where everybody can basically post about everything. And then let those people make the rules about which should be enforced and which not.
As we can see, the social credit system has really nothing to do with sensational dystopian views found in Western media. That much is recognized even by Western experts, who are otherwise extremely critical of China and its system.
No, yeah, of course, like in the West, the meme is, oh, minus that many social credit score. Like, I don't think everybody has a clear understanding of this. Like, experts may have more understanding of it than I do. Um, Still, though, I do think some memes imply what's happening there, okay? Like, the consequences are basically the same. Let's not, don't make this about, like, oh, you have a low credit score, therefore you're unable to do this and this and this. That's the meme, but it's actually true. You know, it's actually what they're doing. Or like, oh, hey, you were mean to, you said, you called a cop, I know, a pig or something. Damn, put it down, you're fucked. Like, basically the extent of it, you know? It encourages good behavior by legal means. That's authoritarianism.
Instead of being a social tracking system, it is entirely unrelated to public surveillance system and does not use any biometric.
Wait, but you need to know what people have done to enforce it. Like, instead of the government actually looking at what you're doing, other people know what you're doing and can report you on it and give you a bad review. That's like saying, yeah, the government isn't looking at what I'm doing. Like, my neighbor is looking at what I'm doing and she reported it to the government. So what's the difference? There's a step in between. Wow, that really makes a fucking difference.
Data. Instead of being a top-down system of social control, it was initiated to deal with very concrete problems of an average Chinese citizen and has widespread approval. Instead of being a system ascribing ratings to citizens, it by and large works as a binary system of blacklisting. Instead of rating people's activities and social life, it is based entirely on the existing law and regulations. But why are...
Okay, so you're telling me that this... Where was it? There was a big wall with just people's faces on it. Come on. Yeah, this wall. These are the people who are probably blacklisted, right? Or like, where's the big wall? I remember there being one with more people. Here? Yeah? No. Okay, I thought there was a wall with more people on it. Well, anyway, you're saying this, and then you're telling me that's 0.15, 0.3% of the population that get blacklisted. No, you have screens which highlight these individuals. Like, I'm assuming it's local TV, by the way. Still though, how do you do it with companies and with individuals? You know? Like, this is social control. And even if they must know like the social credit system to enforce like the binary, right? Like you have a range of the credits, but at a certain point it will be okay, this range has been reached, now you're blacklisted. So there's already a gradient. I know where it was.
Media. That much is recognized even by Western experts who are otherwise extremely critical of China and its system. Instead of being a social tracking system, it is entirely unrelated to public surveillance system and does not use any biometric data. Instead of being a top-down system of social control, it was...
Wait, do you need biometric data to spy on people? The answer is no. For reasons I already explained.
Use any biometric data. Instead of being a top-down system of social control, it was initiated to deal with very concrete problems of an average Chinese citizen and has widespread approval. Instead of being a system ascribing ratings to citizens, it by and large works as a binary system of blacklisting. Instead of rating people's activities and social life, it is based entirely on the existing law and regulations. But why are Westerners so insistent about China's system being one of totalitarian control, despite all the evidence to the contrary? At the end of the day, it is not simply a mistake or a misconception. It is rather a projection onto China of the ills and degeneration of our own societies. These dystopian visions of absolute digital control tells more about our own societies and the corruption of our own elites rather than China and the Communist Party. Like the author of the first hit.
Okay, so he just says, okay, we have basically capitalist people who are in power, and I do think that's a problem, and our private data is being used by them. Like, let's not lie, like, they know who I am, okay? It is, however, incredibly rare that that data will be used to strip away your rights. Right? You have a right to privacy. Companies violate it, in my opinion, but you won't be able to get like lose your ability to vote. You won't lose your you won't get publicly shamed for it. You know, these are all consequences that the state does versus a private company. And that's the key difference, because in the US and in most Western countries, the government still stands above companies, although they are heavily lobbying, etc., etc. But even though that distinction is not as big as I would like it to be, there's still a distinction. While in China, it's no, the government gives you social credits. The government enforces your blacklisting. In Western countries, this is not the case at all. Very important distinction.
Social credit system said, this really seemed to be pointing the way towards a dark potential future.
Yes.
There were frankly a lot of signs and similarities of things happening in the United States. The Chinese system uses data to deal with the
Wait.
future. There were frankly a really seem to be pointing the way towards a dark potential future. There were frankly a lot of signs and similarities of things happening in the United States. The Chinese system uses data to deal with the concrete problems of an average Chinese citizen with the overwhelming support of the Chinese masses. It is digitalization with Chinese characteristics. We must neither copy China.
Also, very important, they'll just say with Chinese characteristics to say, okay, this is socialism or this is a thing, but you don't understand it because it has Chinese characteristics. It has something you cannot understand because it has those characteristics. It's really, really effective, but only if you believe that morals or like systems aren't viable to be applied everywhere. Alright, let's keep that in mind.
China, nor judge it. Instead, we must ensure that the inevitable digitalization in our own societies result in solutions to the problems of our working families and within the context of our own civilization, instead of being used for the enrichment of the oligarchs and imperialist warfare.
Holy shit. Well, that was a pretty sort of informative. I can't say I haven't learned from it, but it's still pretty trash. Like like probably the information that he is posing may be correct. However, I disagree strongly with how we should go about all these issues. This has been terrible. Terrible idea to implement. There is no justification for solving problems regarding to law outside of those systems that are there for the law. Okay, you do not want to have a health contamination be solved by the public system and then go to court. You should be able to sue them as soon as you know something is up. Anyway, if you like this video, like, subscribe. I'm sometimes on Twitch. You can subscribe there as well. Yeah, thanks for watching.